Are we good to go?
I believe so. Yes. So Solutions, Scribal, I'm going to cut you off at 3:58 and make sure you have enough time for your presentation and feedback. Good luck.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here today. My name is Tanner, and I'm here today with my colleagues and fellow founders, Madi and Reed, to present to you Scribal, an innovative medical transcription platform for our healthcare professionals. Scribal's mission is designed to seamlessly and automatically capture patient data in real time in a wide range of operating environments. In order to achieve this mission, we first need to understand the underlying problem. That starts with patient handoffs. What is a patient handoff? Well, that's just the real-time process of transferring health information between care teams. So let's take an example of an emergency call. An emergency call is made to 911, dispatch relays information to EMS, EMS arrives, starts care, calls the hospital. They then drive to the hospital, EMS verbally communicates with the nurse sends that information throughout the hospital. At each point in this process, there's a handoff of information. While it's simple and linear, a comprehensive, high-quality handoff is complex, and as such, it's been called the Bermuda Triangle of healthcare. Here within lies the problem. Joint Commission states that ineffective handoff communications are a primary contributing factor in adverse events. They go on to further state that 2 out of 3 sentinel events, the most serious events reported to Joint Commission, can be contributed to miscommunications. To put that bluntly, substandard patient handoffs result in patient harm. Considering that miscommunications are noted in static environments such as hospitals or clinics, one can only imagine the errors when the environment becomes dynamic, such as that of an ambulance or a helicopter. As a group, we wanted to fix that. This led to the creation of our initial hypothesis that the most immediate and effective way to reduce healthcare miscommunications would be to manage the handoff between the EMS staff and the emergency treatment team. We use that hypothesis to generate a preliminary top-level business canvas and value proposition stating that we seek to deliver communication in a faster, reliable, cost-effective, and efficient manner. So with that initial hypothesis in hand, we reached out to a variety of would-be customers and stakeholders using our various backgrounds. This resulted in more than 40 user interviews with medical personnel. And the interviews themselves generated a lot of feedback to test this hypothesis. Our aerial customers and stakeholders expressed frustration with their current process, having to use a pen and paper to track and record interventions while also providing life-saving care or having to view complex instrumentation. This was furthered when I talked with EMS administration and nursing staff. Both customers stated that while a verbal handoff occurs, its content has a lot of variability, and any written communication is not usually available in a timely manner, nor is it really integrated into the patient health record. Documentation takes a large chunk of time out of a paramedic's time while providing little value to the receiving facility. From these interviews, we determined the handoff occurs, but it fails in its goal to deliver an organized and timely information. We were able to break down each subsection of our customers and stakeholders' needs and wants. EMS teams want a system that speeds up documentation, but doesn't impede their current workflow. Administration needs to improve the quality of these handoff reports, reduce the staff burnout, and allow for faster turnaround times of their EMS teams. And the receiving care facilities need timely, concise, and accurate handoff reports. These interviews led us to believe our initial hypothesis was skewed. At the beginning, we stated we wanted to manage the handoff. However, we know the handoff occurs, it's just not very robust, and it leads to downstream problems. Ultimately, we created a new hypothesis and a working business canvas as pictured here. Our working hypothesis now states that implementation and automation of operational EMS documentation will result in more consistent, accurate, and timely patient handoffs. Ultimately, we are working to deliver value to the customer by creating an easily accessible platform, resulting in better patient outcomes, reduced errors, and overall efficiency. For the rest of the presentation, I'm going to hand it off to Reed and Madi, where they can unpack the components of our business canvas, including the key activities and customer segments, while solidifying our value proposition and elaborating more on our solution, Scribal. I'm going to start with Madi.
Thank you very much, Tanner. Immediately following our customer discovery process, we immediately moved to perform a competitive analysis that looked at two things. Number one, existing off-the-shelf products, especially those that were explicitly mentioned on our user discovery interviews. And number two, actually digging through the USPTO database for patents and patent publications that aligned with both our mission and the problem we were trying to solve. We identified 4 key products that are listed here, as well as listing the traditional transcription that exists currently in a number of hospitals and graph them on a scale of accuracy to time efficiency. Though each of these products certainly deserves time to discuss and to explain its merits, the one product that we repeatedly heard about time and time again was AMFI. AMFI is effectively a tablet specifically designed to be mounted in an ambulance and that has certain software such that it can transcribe data from the medics in an EMS situation. Though AMFI software was noted to be quite good, their hardware was a different story. Multiple users would tell us that the device itself was not particularly user-friendly and that the nature of the device was such that it was mounted inside the ambulance at a location and distance where the microphone designed to collect medic audio was limited, and as a result, the quality of transcription suffered. So our solution is a wearable transcription and data transmission tool, the first wearable of its kind designed to automate otherwise time-consuming documentation requirements on the part of the paramedic as they write and list information with regards to their patient. Our technology is supported by our patent-pending natural language processing powered data collection and analysis module. It has 4 key features. That number one, it may be used in a wide variety of emergency medical situations. Number 2, it requires minimal interaction from the medic. Number 3, it integrates into competing and existing EMS legacy systems. And number 4, that it can be custom tailored based on user requirements. As you can see here is a product sketch of our technology. You can see it currently being worn on the left wrist of the medic as it treats the patient. And you can see here a top view of the device as well, with our setup using analog buttons for which we are actively filing a design patent. The way the technology is designed to be used, as you see here, is the medic will select one of these 4 options to begin recording audio using a microphone on the side of the device. That audio data is then transcribed with the support of Google Cloud's natural language processing API and then used to generate patient care reports specific to the hospital that are transmitted after review for the medics. This allows for an easy automation of medical information while also allowing the medic to focus on what they do best, treating patients. In addition to our product design sketch, we actually developed the device and it's in full operational form. You can see here our MVP specifically built for a Purdue design course. We developed custom circuit boards in order to build this technology, and it's again fully operational. And one of the key features here is actually a digital screen on the back end of the device that provides critical diagnostic information to the medic with regards to the product, to include battery information, the quality of audio, time, and other information as well. Now, when we think about savings based on our discussion with users, we really break our stakeholders down into 2 categories. Number 1, the EMS and medic side, and number 2, the hospitals. And what we found after further conversations and further user interviews is that the value to these 2 different kinds of stakeholders is actually different. From the perspective of the medic and the EMS, it is the time saved by having this documentation be automated that allows them to focus on other tasks or prepare to take care of additional patients and make more calls. And we find, based on the assumptions listed in this slide, that a single medic can expect to save between $5,000 and $6,000 a year of time, and again allows them to continue with their life-saving mission. For the hospitals, the story is a little bit different. The value that the product provides is more about preventing miscommunication, and specifically preventing malpractice cases as it relates to medical miscommunication and EMS transport, which can be incredibly expensive. And for a large hospital defined here as 500 beds plus, we can expect our device to provide savings annually of about $339,000. And again, these assumptions are listed here. Next slide. Finally, we want to talk about lifetime value, which is where our revenue stream comes from. And as shown with the assumptions here, an individual pro license with a 10-year lifetime can expect to bring in about $1,020. And for a typical EMS company where you sell these products in a bundle or a package, the lifetime value is about $8,180. With that being said, I'll pass it over to my colleague Reed, who will discuss the market.
Thanks, Monty. So upon the initial market analysis, these numbers got us really excited. There's over 1 million licensed EMS professionals in the United States, of which there's about 220,000 that are full-time employees. They utilized more than 87,000 registered EMS vehicles to answer more than 9.5 million calls in the year of 2019. That is a ton of documentation, and that just screamed opportunity to us. So we were really eager to reach out to our potential customers to help identify what the current total available market is, and then also whittle it down to what our serviceable available market would be in the future. While these are the total budgets for those respective markets, we would focus specifically on the customer segments of ground and air crews, as well as administration for EMS, as well as the ER physicians and representatives. So how do we want to market to them? We realized that getting the product in the hands of the users would be the most ideal way. And so with that, we had this 3-channel marketing approach. First, we budgeted about a little over $5,000 for 2 people to go to an EMS conference. Lots of hype, everybody's excited, be able to get this product in the hands and kind of talk them through how it would work. Secondly, in the interviews, one thing that kind of kept popping up was that there's always these the medicine periodicals kind of laying around. So we thought about these 5, which are kind of the major ones, getting a 1/4 page advertisement from each. Some of them are actually kind of a double. They are both digital and physical print. So we estimated about $21,000 for that. And then thirdly, we wanted to be able to go into the house, if you will, of the EMS firms, target specifically the largest ones in each state, and really get this product in there, get some demonstrations, possibly let them take it on a mission or a call in order to kind of compare what the standard pen and paper or whatever device they're using and compare it to what our product can do. So overall, if you take the total expenses, and we went with a modest 2,550 users that we would acquire, the first year customer acquisition cost is about $26 per person. So what's next? We're super proud of the work that we've done. We're very excited to compete in this competition. We look forward to a successful completion. The funds that we receive will help go to user interviews to help refine future prototypes, conduct more testing, and eventually apply to more competitions where we can receive further funding to continue our effort. And all of this is definitely in pursuit of our vision, which is to enhance communication en route to a healthier world. Thank you, and we'll take any questions that you have.
Thanks, guys. Really polished and in-depth presentation. I had a couple questions about the product itself and some in sales. My first question is around regulatory concerns. Are there any software validation, certifications, things like that you have to do, considering this is in the critical path of life support of emergency?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's really 2 regulatory agencies, I think, that come to mind here. One is the FDA, and the other, which may be a little surprising, is actually the FAA. So when we kind of looked into the customer segments, there was the ground ambulance and the air ambulances. And what we found is, depending who exactly we're trying to target, the regulatory requirements are different. So from the FDA's perspective, one of the neat things about our device is, even though it's fundamentally different in terms of hardware, the way in which we deal with the data is actually very similar to existing products that are already on the market. So there's kind of a path that's already been defined by some of our competitors that was listed. I think one of the things that we will have to tackle from a regulatory perspective that maybe hasn't been done yet is actually with regards to the military and the aerial side. So there is a regulatory requirement known as an airworthiness release, where that hardware, which is kind of new and unique that we're providing, would have to be tested for EMI and other regulatory considerations in order to be allowed use. And that process typically costs about $20,000. So kind of keeping all these different factors in play with regards to regulatory requirements is definitely a must for us. And as we kind of see how much funding we receive, that'll guide where that money goes. But yes, definitely a major consideration for us.
To just to piggyback off Marty's point as well, there is a system out there called the Nemesis system where the EMS data has to be reported into, and they provide outlines on how to provide software validation, as well as companies that have done the software validation. So hoping to make that list with future iterations of this.
Got it. A second one out of 3 is, how are you thinking about situation awareness requiring minimum interaction from emergency professionals?
Yeah, I can tackle this one as well. And so this was kind of an interesting back and forth for us because it designed some of our key design features. Initially, we had gone with actually a digital interface. You know, just the way it sounds in product design. Oh, everybody wants a touch screen and a glass screen, and that's obviously what's best for the patient. But what we found, especially talking with some of our users and with regards to like electronic health record softwares and existing documentation requirements with our competitors, these digital screens actually require a significant amount of time to interface with by the medic or by the physician or by whoever is using the device, which is actually why we went to that analog style system that's very simple. As the medic, you know, verbalizes what they're doing with the patient, all they have to do is select one of 4 buttons and it will automatically begin to categorize the type of transcription. And then internally, based on what the actual information is in the transcription, that'll be used to inform the PCR. So the idea here is to take as much time for the medic and documentation requirements as possible and minimize it, and then just have a final basic review process where the medic can say, all I had to do was select a button, verbalize, you know, maybe certain maneuvers or certain, you know, operational aspects as I would otherwise do. And now all I have to do is take a quick glance at this generated form and submit it. So that's kind of where the reduction in documentation time comes from.
Got it.
And kind of a follow on to that. Sorry if I can.
You're good.
One of the common practice is supposed to be perform a procedure and then immediately document what happened. In most cases, in the super stressful environment, you know, chaos everywhere in the back of an ambulance, you know, going 90 miles an hour on the road, that never happened. And so really with this, the focus is that you capture the information exactly when it happens, especially things like vitals. A lot of those I think we found in the interviews was the vitals were kind of the most important thing that never really got documented. It was easy to know, you know, at 247, we performed CPR and that was something that was easily remembered, but what was the heart rate at this time? So that's really an additional benefit for this to increase the efficiency and accuracy of the documentation.
Got it. That makes sense. My last thing is less of a question, more of a comment on go-to-market. Obviously, you guys have done a lot more research in this particular market than I have, but I would say it seems like at least for sort of similar adjacent markets like fire, emergency response, and things like that, an approach that works. Just because this is kind of hard markets like this where you have to go to trade shows and things. There's a lot of capital costs to advertising in the beginning to even get known. An approach that I've seen from other founders is do pilots. So work closely with 1 or 2 particular emergency response facilities and just like, you know, live inside their building, live inside their place for a month or 2. Could really get to know the people, really get to know the situations, and then have them do pilots with you guys. Once you have like 3 or 4 good testimonials from pilots, start from there, expand from there. I think that works. That works as well as any other approach. And I think pilots would be a good kind of next step to not only validate the product, but also validate product market fit and get some good evangelists for how it works. That's it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for that.
Hey guys. Go ahead.
Great job on presenting. I have a couple of questions. So do you guys know like how many key metrics do these EMS people take when, let's say, an accident happens or when they're called on, when they're in the ambulance or whatever? Do you guys know?
So there's the specific number, I don't know off the top of my head, but typically it's called a PCR, or a patient care report, and where they capture, you know, the name, kind of your driver's license information, and then they go ahead and then list the procedures, medications, and everything that had been administered through that.
Got it. So those are like the key things that they kind of document, correct? And so like, how do the symbols on the watch kind of relate to those PCR metrics?
Yeah, definitely. I can jump on this one a little bit. And so, of course, 4 buttons in of itself, the purpose isn't to designate every piece of information, right? So, for example, looking at these 4 buttons here, you've got procedures, miscellaneous information, medication, and vitals, right? So within that, you have a lot of, you know, unique specific information that the PCR report would be filled in immediately. So one of the things and the way that we basically fill out those reports with only those 4 indications is by actually looking at the type of information that is being transcribed. So basically in the software side, right, once the data has been transcribed, right, and there are keywords, those keywords exist in categories that are then used to fill out the PCR. So, you know, if you're within vitals, or excuse me, within medication, if the medic was to select a medication they're providing based on the name that was transcribed, transcribed, maybe that would be listed under antibiotics, would be in a separate form in the PCR. So we're not just using the manual selection. The purpose of the analog buttons and the manual selection is really more for battery reduction, so that it's only keyed on at times where the medic actually needs to record info, but it's the actual content of the transcription that is actually and actively recognized internally that allows us to intelligently inform those PCRs, if that makes sense.
Got it. So, but like if things are getting verbally recorded, isn't a lot of going to be recorded and only certain part of it is actually necessary in the next step of the process? And so how do you get through all of the fluff and only push, the important pieces forward?
Right. So that's part of the reason we have the analog buttons, is so that the medic who knows what's on those PCRs can key critical information. So that's kind of our initial filter, I guess you could say, to remove everything else that exists, because a mission can take anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, depending on the type of medical environment, where the hospital is, et cetera. So it is a long time. So rather than record for an hour, ultimately, we may actually only be recording for 3 to 4 minutes, in which we're able to kind of really dig down into what's important in the transcriptions.
And another kind of key to that too is current paramedics, they're trained to verbally or to verbalize what procedure or medication that they're going to do. So that's something that was already active. So really the only difference from standard operating procedures that they would normally follow is selecting the button before they verbalize it. And so that keys to just focus on that specific segment, like Monty was saying.
No, I get that, but like I'm just saying, if there's subcategories even within those categories, and so let's say you mentioned at 247 you take vitals, right? Like that might not even be necessary in the next step of the procedure, whereas only the vitals at like a certain point of time is necessary. So how do you get through that? I guess it's something for you guys to think about. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was you guys are recording patient information, right? So you guys have to be HIPAA compliant. I think you guys should look into that since it's very sensitive information. And so I think like one big thing why I know it hasn't worked in the past is like, let's say when you say names, right? A lot of the names that you say do not get transcribed properly, right? And so and this is very sensitive information, like HIPAA takes it very, very seriously on like nothing can be seen from someone else. So if it gets passed on to someone else, if it's not transcribed properly, that means someone has to make a manual edit, correct? The wrong information is getting passed on. So you guys have to be very careful, because like I know even Google, when you use the transcription, it's not 100%, especially with names. Like it can never get my name, for example, like especially like, Asian names or, and so you guys have to be careful, like when you guys are using or moving forward with the speech format, you guys have to be very careful of like what HIPAA compliance you guys have to pass. Because even like, I think telling vitals in front of other people, especially relatives, I think it's not HIPAA compliant, because you cannot verbalize a certain information about the patient. So be careful about that, and just look into that. And also like figure out like what pieces of documentation are actually important and what are fluff. Like, yes, documentation, like now we live in a world where data is very important, but what data is actually important? And I figure out a way to only record that. And that, like, I love the fact that you guys figured out in your iteration process that data is going to be recorded, but you guys want to make that process more effective. And so you figured out this way of like verbalizing it, but now figure out a way where you're only able to record things that are actually pertinent in the next step to the doctor, because the doctor gets a lot of things and they don't even care half of it. Like they're going to get the vitals again and then start operating. So figure that out. I think you guys have something here. Figure that out and then keep moving forward. Great job.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's great
Thank you.
feedback. I know one of the things that we try that we're still working on, I think speaks to your point, is rather than necessarily using like a canned natural language processing API with existing databases, was to actually build our own. And I started kind of messing with that, where really we involve only keywords of relevance in our, I guess you could say, natural language processing database. It's definitely a timely, complex process, and there's a lot of filtering that's involved, so it can get pretty complicated, but I think it is a potential approach that we may take from a technical perspective that gets after, I think, a very valid point that you made.
Yeah, I mean, to just that point, like if you're going down that path, right, make sure like you already have a very unique approach of building this database. If not, then you are stuck with the same problem that the other companies have, right? Like not being able to transcribe. So it's great that you're taking on this challenge, but it's like figure out a way that you can like, you know, you have something in your mind that kind of beats everyone else, and that's why you're building what you're building. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense building, you know, the NLP.
And real quick, I know we have a few minutes left. So for the EMT, you guys have gone to this wrist wearable. And I'm assuming it's because and I had to step out and get my charger, but they have to physically push the buttons on here before they speak on your wrist on the watch. Is that true? Okay.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. But is there any way, because I'm just thinking, you know, like of an EMT, like, you know, you're constantly moving your hands. I mean, your hands are your tools at this point, right? And so could you, or have you validated that that's where the wearable should be, is on the wrist, or did you just assume that's where the wearable should be? Like, I'm just thinking of like police, you know, body cams, and obviously that is a wearable that's recording video, but should this wearable be on the chest somewhere versus on the wrist, or did you just assume wrist?
I can take that one. So based off some user feedback, we had a couple different designs in mind, whether it be wrist or even on the uniform, and eventually we might move to a more uniform based one. But the current like users, EMTs, when they're performing measures, they're often writing on their glove, which is already near their wrist. So moving their hand a handful of inches back to touch a button would be pretty straightforward for them.
Why are they writing on their glove?
Because it's the fastest way, you know, it's the pen and paper approach.
Because they don't have something to speak into.
Right. They don't have something to speak into. They don't have a digital format to do this. Yeah. And I think even in some of our air folks, their SOP tells them to write on a piece of tape on their knee pad. So it's already pretty close there. It's kind of in the SOP, and it's kind of in a neat location, but we have thought about other designs as well.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, like, if it could truly be an all auditory where the commands are vitals and then they speak the vital, and I don't have to physically touch something, to me it'd be more appropriate to have it on the chest, because that's a consistent spot versus I'm moving my arms all around, or I'm holding somebody's, you know, like. And then you also have first responders getting more and more used to the whole body cam, it's on my chest function. So you could already kind of partner with body cam companies potentially for the delivery of this. Okay, police are body cams, EMT are the, you know, the body recorder, whatever, as opposed to it kind of going to the iWatch kind of trend.
Yeah, I love that. I know there's some interesting notes that we kind of took away. So one is we actually considered basically having a system where you didn't have to actuate it entirely, and so you basically the system would be able to recognize keywords, and technically that's very much feasible. It's just very computationally expensive, and for like a mobile device, the battery drain was significant. So that was kind of a design feature that was considered. Hey, let's remove everything, right? Let's just key on keywords from audio that's actively recording, but it didn't really weigh out. And then we also found one cool thing is it's definitely customer segment based, right? So when we talked to our flight paramedics, about half of them actually really liked the wrist idea, kind of for the same reason Tanner mentioned. And then the other half actually suggested that it be on their helmet. So you can see in this picture, for example, he's wearing a helmet. And that's part of the reason is it's kind of out of the way of everything else. And, you know, like you said, they mentioned and they moved their appendages. So I think one area of potential from a business perspective, just like that helmet there. Thanks, Reed. One area of potential is kind of breaking into different segment markets, and that allows us to file additional intellectual property for different designs and actually integrating our system into the helmet microphone systems, for example. So I think there's a lot of room to play with there, but definitely something that we've had to kind of take the cue from our users about the way we and where we place the device.
Or can you piggyback on kind of already like the body cam movement that's already there? Can you piggyback on that, where it's just like the next iteration of, you know, I mean, because even police officers have to do reports and everything, and that is so time consuming. For my husband's a police officer, so time consuming. like it would be, I'm sure any police officer would like to just be able to talk into their body cam, you know, and then it transcribe their reports and stuff instead of going back into their, you know, their police car and typing into the computer. I mean, so I think there's maybe some other applications. If you just look at first responders, like body cam, this, you know, it's all about transcribing. You're in the transcribing service. That's what you're delivering is transcription services to emergency responders.
And with that, we have to wrap off Scribal's presentation. But good job and great feedback, judges. If you want to collect yourselves for a few minutes,
All right.
and then Scribal, if you wouldn't mind stopping the share screen.